VikesNow, Dustin Baker, the August 31st edition. We are one day away from September, which is the best month of the year. Just vibes, everything about it. As soon as the calendar flips. Do you agree, Josh?
Oh, it's my birthday month, so I have to agree.
Yeah. You got football starting and your birthday, so that's a no-brainer. Welcome back to the
Yeah,
show. It's been a wild week, hasn't it?
it sure has. Yeah, yesterday was a fun day. Well, not so much a fun day, but it was a busy day.
Yeah. Oh, for me it was both
Yeah.
because I knew it was going to be busy, but I guess for some reason I convinced myself that the Vikings would just drop a list and then we'd extrapolate. But it seriously was like one by one we learned who
Mm-hmm.
the players were. So I want to explain to the viewers, I didn't record yesterday because at each point in the day, I'll give you two examples. I was like, all right, Kellen Monde waved. I was going to hop on and talk about that. But you can't really talk about that unless you know what happens to Mannion. And so by the time that it would have aired to the general public, it would have felt like stale news. Same thing happened with Armin Watts. I was like, holy shit, this guy got cut. He's a starter. Let me get on and talk about that. Had I done that, I would have had a bunch of spitballed theories about what might be coming. And then 10 minutes later, Ross Blacklock was traded for. So I didn't record anything yesterday because it kind of felt like I'd be posting a Vikings Packer preview 30 minutes before kickoff and nobody would care by the time it was posted. So Josh and I are probably going to go a little bit longer today because there's just so much shit to talk about. I've got kind of a list. We'll go through the cuts. And then if you see us peeking at our phones, it's because we're recording this at 11 a.m. when conceivably more shit happens about, does Kellen Mond get claimed? And you might already know that by the time you watch this. So that's what we're going to do. Sir, out of the gate, I kind of stole my own thunder and your thunder. Armin Watts, indisputably, being released was the shocking news of the day from a grand view. Perhaps Mon not working out, 3 years in the rear view. We'll say that was a bigger news item. But Watts was on a rookie contract, and it's sold to us, at least for guys like you and me, as a cap clearing move. Fine and dandy. However, the guy was a cheap starter. So tell me, why on earth is Watts not going to start for this football team?
Well, I think we're still in the process of figuring that one out. I mean, they made the trade for Blacklock, but like at best, he's an upside player who right now is nothing more than really like a depth guy who might come on special teams, make a few plays on the defense, like on rotational downs. But right now, there's nobody on this roster that can really replace what Armin Watts does for this team. Like I I think we're still in the process of learning that stuff, but yeah, we definitely need to see more happen before we can actually decide that one. I think.
So he had a good year as a starter in Michael Pierce's stead. So perhaps they just thought it was an outlier year. But I'll pound home again. He was cheap and he was trending as a starter. So all of this cap clearing I call bullshit is like, yeah, but it was like a couple $1 million. And then the other misnomer is that, oh, they're clearing cap space for a big move. That's fine if you consider a big move Tyler Johnson, or I don't even think they can afford a Dominican Sue. Right now, the maneuvers that they made were just to get into like an operational 6.5 million under the cap because they still got to pay the practice squad players and all of this. The only way that they could really expand the cap would be to restructure Eric Kendricks, and that would get them closer to like 10 million. So I'll continue to be flummoxed by why Watts was released and not simply benched. I mean, on their own depth chart, he was a starter. I mean, I'm not a big Armin Watts guy. I just thought he did pretty well in replacement of Michael Pierce. So do you think that Blacklock will start or James Lynch will start or the guy that will start at that spot isn't on the team yet?
So here's another thing. Like with James Lynch, I wasn't really sold on him during the preseason at all. Like maybe he did some crazy things in training camp that the public didn't get to see,
Mm-hmm.
but what we saw from preseason was just a kind of like Blacklock, just another rotational guy that might come in and make a few plays. But I don't think I don't think either one of them is really able to step in and be that starter on day one. And the other thing with Watts is like you can't convince me that they couldn't have gone out and made a trade for this with this guy, gotten some sort of
Yeah.
draft compensation in return. Like this dude, 5 sacks last year. Like breakout year, 46 tackles, I think, made 9 starts. Like, obviously, this dude can play football at the NFL level. So you got to think there was somebody out there that would have been able to make a trade with them.
Especially because they unloaded Jesse Davis like 2 hours later, or maybe not even that long. So I agree with you. And out of the big titans of industry like Harrison Smith and Eric Kendricks, who actually had a down year last year, Armin Watts was about as consistent as it was on the roster. So that adds to the mystery as to why the new regime was sour on him. And again, for the second time, he was the starter on their depth chart, not just something you and I pulled out of our ass. It was like they anointed him as such. That's one thing I'll probably forget unless I mention it right now, is that next year for fans and us going into this, the depth chart is a pretty reasonable indicator of what they're feeling. I think when you and I did the live on Airvision, we had Luigi Villain was on there at like whatever he was, OLB 3 or 4, but no, I think it was 4 or 5. And I was like, oh, but they kind of like him. Well, indeed, next summer when we get to this spot, the depth chart they put out is somewhat accurate. Now, the Watts thing, goofy, but it will remain goofy until we see the full plan.
Yeah.
On that note of the guys that made it that surprised you, I'm going to guess our lists are extremely similar. I had Luigi Villain, Asese from the Gophers, and Vidarian Lowe, which signals to me that they like their guys. Nick Muse was the only draft class participant who was cut. Jonathan Bullard, just because he felt like a mundane signing way back in whatever it was, April or so. What else besides Villain, Asese, and Vidarian Lowe? Dudes making it. Which stood out to you?
I'm still surprised that they kept the 5 running backs.
Yeah,
Obviously there might be in the works with a trade with Madison or maybe even Ham at some point in the next week or so. But with a pass first offense, you got to think 5 running backs. What's the deal with that? Like, I know they're all talented dudes, but they only kept 5 receivers too, so they obviously trimmed down in some areas so they could keep those 5. So I'm interested to see what happens with those guys.
I think the 5 wide receivers is probably easily expandable to 6, especially if they are interested in Tyler Johnson or the goofy trade theory about Jalen Reagor comes to fruition. But the problem with 5 running backs, whether it was yesterday at this time or now, is that there's no easy cut candidate. So, if they do sign Tyler Johnson, they're not going to, you wouldn't think they'd be like, oh, you might as well cut the fullback. We don't need that as part of our offense, because they would have figured that out by now.
Yeah, it's really weird because, like, obviously Ham can play a little bit of like more of a hybrid tight end sort of role for the team. So maybe that's what they've got in plan for him. But as far, like Madison, he's an awesome power back, but you've got 3 other guys in that room that are just super talented. And I feel like you want to get those guys touches as much as possible. And if he's eating up snaps, that's just more time that they don't get on the field to make plays.
I often think about that, about the attention within the offense to these various targets, because you can cruise around the internet and find KJ Osborne is the next big thing. He'll be the WR2 if something happens to Thielen. On that same Google search, you'll see that Irv Smith is going to have a breakout year for the 4th year in a row. And then you have CJ Ham's going to make the team. And it's like, well, the ball can't go to all these places, especially when you want Jefferson to break 2,000 yards. It's like, there's somebody is going to get ignored. And that kind of leads me to believe why we don't have a more prominent TE2 is because they're like the Rams last year. It was Higbee and Munt, and they were like, we're fine. We'll go win a Super Bowl. But in terms of attention, like 4 running backs plus Ham, like somebody's going to get blatantly ignored.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's no way around it. Like, if you roll in with this offense on week 1, somebody's going to end up with 0 touches that on another team hypothetically should get a lot of touches.
Yeah. And this is season wide. This isn't just against the Packers. Like,
oh yeah.
Unless Dalvin Cook is hurt for the season, or God forbid something happens to one of the main wide receivers, Ty Chandler and Amir Smith-Marset, it should be very small doings for them. And we spent all of the summer forecasting this gigantic upside for every player, that somebody's going to be ignored, especially when you keep 5 running backs.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to watch. Another thing that I was a little bit surprised about, just the fact that they kept those, like you said, the Luigi Villain, the five edge rushers there. I felt like they only should have kept. They only needed to keep 4 in that group, but maybe they saw something in Villain that we didn't. Obviously, he had a pretty decent last preseason game with that. I think he had a sack and the forced fumble interception sort of deal. But yeah, I felt like 4 was enough there. Could have kept somebody else, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, on Villain, he didn't look like a game breaker, like snap by snap during the preseason. However, he recovered a fumble against 49ers, and when the ball was tipped way the hell up in the air against the Broncos, he came down with it. And you start to wonder, all right, is this the kind of dude that's going to make those plays? Now, what we've learned about the preseason, it doesn't matter. Like
Right.
Albert Wilson, 2 touchdowns, get out of town. Who was the other one we were joking about yesterday? We were joking about somebody that said, "Oh, I guess the preseason doesn't even matter."
Oh shoot, who was it? I don't even remember. There were too many cuts yesterday that I can't even remember who it was. Well, I'll throw another one out there. It was Miles Doran that I was a little surprised got the
Yeah,
axe because he had a really nice last preseason game, and I felt like he kind of outperformed Metellus throughout a lot of the preseason. He made a lot of plays, and then it was a preseason opener where Metellus allowed that completion on 3rd and 25. That's a big no. So I was a little surprised by that one. I'm trying to find.
oh no, it was. I figured out it was T.Y. McGill. It
Okay,
was
yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
triple sourced from Schefter, Rappaport, and then R. Chris Thomas in Twin Cities that he was released. And then it was walked back, I guess, so to speak, by the Vikings that said, no, he's on injured reserve. But we were told that he was only going to be hurt for a week or two. So I'm still confused
Yeah, I
whether or
don't
not he
understand.
shows up early in the season or if he's out for the year.
Well, if he's put on IR before the deadline, then that means he's just done. Like he
Yeah,
can't come
that's
back.
what I
So
thought, but
yeah,
it was like we're semantics games. Like
yeah,
we
I don't
released
know.
him, no, we didn't, and that was the one that he was the Mister Mankato on defense, and it felt like nobody cared because they released him, but then they didn't. Let's talk about this disastrous retrospect of the 2021 draft class, especially in the middle of it. Now, when you look at the draft class, it's like honey and Tabasco, where you have Darisaw and Wangu, Patrick Jones potentially, Cameron Bynum, and Amir Smith Marset. But people, they won't tout that. They're going to talk to you about the dudes that were cut, all the guys from the Jets trade, Kellen Monde, Wyatt Davis, and then Janarius Robinson. So the midsection of that draft was consecutive misses by Rick Spielman. I know that this is a new regime that has zero loyalty to those guys, and it came out in the flesh yesterday. But did you support? Are you okay with all of those dudes exiting stage left?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like you said, we got to keep in mind that as bad as this draft was, all these picks were virtually free because they traded down and they still got Darisaw. So at the end of the day, I feel like they could have gone a lot better with these picks, but at the end of the day, like it's not gonna, it doesn't affect the team trajectory anyway. I think I'm totally fine with all the cuts that they made yesterday in the 3rd round. Davis, I don't think he has a role on the team. Surratt, I felt
Oh
like
yeah, I forgot him.
yeah,
Too many.
he might have had something in the special teams, but you've got plenty of guys that can fill in that area. You go down the waiver wire, find somebody in free agency if you need to, but and then Monde, I think he ends up on the practice squad. Honestly, I don't think anybody's going to end up picking him up unless some surprise team comes in here in the last hour to find him. But yeah, I think he ends up on the practice squad. If he
Over
doesn't end up,
Mannion or
I
both?
so yeah, that's another thing because Mannion was the rumor too that
Oh,
he
they
could end
love
up on the
him.
practice
They
squad.
just
Yeah,
love him.
I
Weirdest damn thing.
I really hope it's Mond on that practice squad because what do you do in storing Mannion? Because like you know what Mannion is. At least Mond, you can see maybe a couple like the Raiders game.
Mm-hmm.
He had some really good throws. Even in the last game against Denver, he made some really nice plays. He just sometimes he made the wrong decision and got a sack. And then there were a couple of times where his receivers just flat out dropped the ball. So that didn't help him either. But there were flashes. Like you could see things starting to work with him. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he has at least some potential. So I really hope they keep him on the practice squad over Mannion. If they don't, then it's just they need another QB coach for some reason. So
Yeah, it was also really cool how Nick Mullins, that acquisition, fixed the QB2 once and for all. And I want the point of order, sort of obvious. Last year, that wouldn't have happened. They would have rolled with Mannion no matter what. And because they did, I'm sure we would have seen his ass for one game for whatever reason. And we would know certifiably what would happen in that damn game. He would look like Paul Bunyan, couldn't move. And we would lose, 30-13 because we couldn't move the ball. All the
Well,
drives stalled.
13 is a little generous, I think.
Yeah, that's true. However, that's a point of order in the sense that the new regime recognized it. There's not as intense Mannion fascination, and I'm glad somebody realized it. So Mullins is the QB2, arguably the top 8 QB2 in the league. And I would have said that still if he was on the Raiders. They just happen to have Jared Stidham, who McDaniels likes more. But that problem is fixed. The other, in retrospect now, looking back at all the training camp, all the preseason, now we know what the roster is in its base form. Because the Vikings have had such shitty luck at right guard, or their solutions were so shitty, I consider Ed Ingram winning the job this summer the biggest Vikings story of the summer. Am I wrong?
I think you're 100% spot on. Like, unless Darrisaw's projection, like all the comparisons to Trent Williams, I feel like definitely has a role in there too. But Ingram winning that right guard spot far and away, like coming away, no questions asked.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. But man, it's got me nervous. Like, they go out week 1 and all of a sudden he just drops a turd in the first game of the regular season. That would be the most Vikings thing to have
and
happen.
That could happen. He's a rookie.
That could happen.
Should happen.
Right. Like, you got Kenny Clark on that defense. Like, there's no reason that he should be able to stop all Pro Bowl defensive caliber players from the Packers side of the ball. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, he's definitely the storyline of the summer.
I think it's so scintillating because we were told Jesse Davis was the front runner coming out of June. We're like, that tackle, that shitty tackle, he's the guard. And we're like, oh, well, Zimmer never really left then. This is what they would have done in past years. And then quietly, Ingram mixed in first team. Then we got to see him a little bit against the Raiders. And in the past 2 weeks, it's become a foregone conclusion that he's the right guard and he might actually be good. And we haven't had that feeling since Hutchinson. I swear to God.
Yeah,
they always have half-assed solutions at right guard.
Forget good, like even just average. Like,
yeah,
this is a complete luxury, just having this guy you can throw out there, not have any worry about. But yeah, this is gonna be very interesting to watch going into week 1 for sure.
We have fond memories of 2019 and Josh Klein as if he was like this big deal. All he was not bad. Like, he wasn't terrible. He was like a 60 or 70 PFF, like a journeyman guard that didn't get bowled over. So I think all of those factors, to me, I'm probably going to do an article about the what we know now about the summer, all the biggest storylines. And I think that one has to be number 1 because it feels like with a week and a half to go before the season starts, that Ingram is ironclad as being a lot better than we've seen in the last 8 years at right guard.
And I feel like you could say that other than center, pretty much every spot on the offensive line should hypothetically be a lot better this year. Darrisaw year 2, Ezra Cleveland continues to improve on his career. Brian O'Neill, obviously all pro caliber talent there. We gotta see the Vikings in some more big games for him to get that sort of recognition, I think. But all those guys should be awesome this year. There's no reason to believe that they won't be.
And Brian O'Neill's being paid as if he's the best of the best. So he's fine. And offensive linemen typically don't like kudos. And on Ezra Cleveland, the cool thing about him is he is exactly what a guard should be. They drafted him. You never really hear about him. You don't like, because it's a long shot that you're going to find a Pro Bowl or all pro guard, especially in these parts. But when you get Cleveland, he's trending to be good and a serviceable guard that most fans don't even know his name. People who watch this show will know his name, but my uncle won't know who Ezra Cleveland is.
Right.
So, yeah, and that's good because there's a decent chance that if he hears me bemoaning Drew Samia, and you don't have to do that about Cleveland. All right, let's see. Here's one more thing I want to ask you before I go down this list of cuts and get some reactions from you. We either don't care or are conveniently not making a big deal out of the fact Louis Cine couldn't grab the starting job. Is that because Bynum is entitled to a second act, or is Cine on his way to being, it's going to take a while to grow him? He hasn't seized the day like Ingram.
Yeah, I think one, it's just a matter of circumstance. Like, I don't think there was any chance that Harrison Smith, first of all, was going to end up leaving the starting lineup. Like, that was solid through and through throughout the entire training camp. Bynum in his 3 games, I think that he got a lot of snaps. He played really, really damn well last year. So I feel like at least through this first month, you got to roll him out there. Just okay, let's see what we actually have in this guy because he showed some stretches throughout last season where he could be really good, but he just didn't get enough playing time. So let's see what happens with this guy. If not, we've got a guy in Lewis Cine that we feel like could also hypothetically be a guy that could go out there and do the same sort of production.
On Bynum, I like to point out, I'm not sure if I've done this on this show, is that he didn't play well for a fourth rounder. He played well for an NFL safety in those
Right.
games. He looked like, I remember tweeting, it was almost like, heresy. Like he didn't miss a beat that game against the Ravens with Harrison Smith gone. It was like, oh, this is the same thing.
And
And
it's crazy because he played cornerback at Cal. So he's learning a completely new position to him. Like obviously it's the same area of the field, but it's different role, different responsibility. Like it was super impressive to see him just go out there and be like, yeah, I can do this too.
yeah, making plays. And I think there was probably a hesitation nationally or league wide to think, oh, yeah, for fourth rounder, looked pretty good. No, he looked wonderful for an NFL safety. And then the other thing on this, I guess the caveat is that the way we don't really know what this defense will look like until September 11th. They could have seen on the field all the time. And it's just that he doesn't have the job on the depth chart. And in that regard, like, who cares?
Yeah, I think that's another thing to keep in mind with the entire broad scope of this defense. Like it's just a bunch of guys that can play a whole lot of different positions. Like even
Fast guys. Yep.
Look at Brian Asamoah. He could go into the box. He could even step back in coverage if you need him to. He's fast enough to do pretty much anything on the field. Bynum, if you need him to play a little bit of nickel corner, he's obviously got the college experience that he can go out and do that too. And then the 3-4, you got Daniil Hunters, Darius Smith mixing between pass rush and probably stepping back in coverage every once in a while too. So it's just a bunch of guys that can do a lot of different things, and I feel like that's the best way to run a defense in today's NFL.
Yes, especially in that 3-4 scheme that we're not used to. It'll be one of the weirdest adjustments watching Vikings football. It's just so stoic and historic that the Vikings trot out there in a 4-3. All right, here's what I want to do. I'm going to go down the list of cuts. I want you to give me one sentence, whatever comes to mind about each individual. Is that fair?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Dan Chesano.
Special teams god.
Yeah. Practice
Yeah,
squad or no?
I feel like he's gonna land on the practice squad unless somebody really, really needs a gunner on their roster right now. I think he's gonna land it back in Minnesota. They love him there, and I don't think there's any reason to leave.
Zach Davidson.
Too many drops.
You already talked about Wyatt Davis, Nate Hairston.
Nate Hairston, just I didn't notice him enough. Yeah, that's all I really got on him. I feel like
explains why he was cut.
Yeah.
Donatel holdover did not make it. Tristan Jackson, wide receiver.
Really bad drop in the last preseason game.
Poor guy here is destined to get cut no matter what. Bryant Kovac.
Yeah, too many running backs. There's too many running backs. I think that's a guy that honestly I feel like could end up being claimed on waivers in the next half hour or so. So that's something that I'm keeping an eye on. If not, I really hope he lands on the practice squad because he's a guy that I think has a lot of potential too.
All right, this year's AJ Rose. Blake Lynch.
Blake Lynch. Really surprising. I thought he was going to land on this roster especially when he didn't play in that last preseason game. I thought he was like, okay, yeah, this dude's set. I think he's better than Troy Dye, so I thought that's why. But yeah.
Yeah, and he had some incumbency too. He'd been with the team for 2 years. You already talked about Mannion. I think this is your guy, Zach Mccloud.
Zach Mccloud, I think he's a practice squad guy. I think he's a practice squad guy.
He'll be back. Myron Mitchell.
He flamed out. He had a really good start to camp, really good start to preseason, and then the last 2 games just again, kind of like Nate Hairston, didn't notice him enough.
Yeah, and that's when you start to put the puzzle together. That's why he is kind of a WR8. This is because of said flameouts. Nick Muse.
The young Zach Davidson.
That works. Perry or Pari Nickerson.
He's too old for this defensive back room. I think there were just too many young guys that just took the spots away from him.
Don't know the first name. Timon or Timon Paris.
Timon Paris. Just not again. He's just not good enough at that left guard spot, especially with Ezra Cleveland there.
Janarius Robinson.
A super athletic pass rusher that I think is going to get claimed by somebody.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, we never even got to look at him at all. I mean,
Yeah,
aside from training camp, he was on IR all last year. I don't know if he'll be quite like Daniel Carlson, the one that got away, but we don't know shit about him.
nope.
TJ Smith, D tackle.
TJ Smith. Just again, he's he's pretty sure to be cut. I mean, just too bland on the field, I think.
Ty Smith. He does the
Ty Smith.
hopscotch back and forth between signed and released by the Vikings.
Yeah. It's the D back room is too full. Can't keep them all.
Yeah. We call him in these parts Josh Skoll.
Josh School. Yeah. Jeez. Just I think there was one day in training camp where he fumbled. They had like 3 fumbled snaps every single time he was on the field. So yeah, I think he was kind of a no-brainer at some point.
Chaz Surratt.
Really athletic, not not all the way there in terms of technique as a linebacker yet.
Yeah, that was a swing and a miss. And we should have actually had a standalone topic about this. Next guy, I'll give us a paragraph. Jalen Twyman.
Jalen Twyman, my guy. I think I really hope he lands back on the practice squad. I thought he was showing some really nice signs early in preseason. The last game was a little bit rough for him, but yeah, he's a dude. I think I'm going to stand by it. He's got a lot of potential coming out of Pitt. He was awesome, and he just hasn't played enough football in the last 2 years to really earn a roster spot at this point, I think.
Yeah, they had me hoodwinked because after preseason game 1 or 2, I think it was 1, Ed Donatil gave him an A+, and said all these great things.
We've got breaking news here.
Uh-oh, what do we
The
got?
Cleveland Browns have claimed Kellen Mond.
Really?
Yeah, that was one of the teams I was worried about, especially after they released Josh Rosen yesterday, just because they just don't have a backup quarterback right now. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's interesting for sure.
So is there another guy we're forgetting about, or is it Watson, Brissett, Monde? Do they have a
They've got another guy right now. He's probably going to get cut though. It was Josh Rosen and another guy like at the exact same playing level as Josh Rosen. So
okay?
I expected both of them to just be cut. So I think that Mon's going to end up being the backup there, at least for Brissett, and while
Yeah.
Watson comes back.
Well, that's kind of cool because stylistically, they're mobile. I don't know how big Brissett's arm is. We know Watson's is big, and we know Mond's is big. So you can kind of see the vision, and plus, probably why you had your theory. That's a Stefanski-led team, and who knows if he still has a tunnel to the Vikings to inquire about, is this guy doable? Probably not, or I don't know. Who knows if the Vikings even wanted him back? Maybe they didn't. That
Yeah.
also means that Mannion's probably on his way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he's on the practice squad now. Yeah, they've got the excuses they need. Yeah, he's back. Another dude that just got claimed, Tyler Johnson, is off waivers. Houston took him. So that's
Mm,
not super expected. I thought he was going to go early. If he was there for the Vikings, I thought jump on it now. But yeah,
yeah. I hear you. All right. Well, now time is of the essence to go scribble on the internet via writings about this Mon thing. So we'll hop off air. Don't look now, but next Wednesday when we're back, we'll be previewing Vikings Packers. You can feel it in your bones.
it's almost here. I can't wait.
All right, man. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Awesome. See you later.
Later. Skull, baby.